The tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise is shrouded in mystery, used as a device by Palpatine to manipulate Anakin Skywalker into becoming a Sith Lord. The claim that Palpatine could use the knowledge of Plagueis to save Padme from death was, by Palpatine's own admission in the book Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, an exaggeration. So, was the tale of Plagueis' power true or a lie? Could he really stop death? Was he wise enough to bend the Force to his will, usurping the natural order of life? All of these questions are revealed in the Legends Darth Plagueis book, and this lore is what makes Plagueis my favorite Sith Lord of all time. His perception of the Force, his knowledge of it, and what he was able to achieve make him one of the most important Force users of all time. First, it's important to understand the way that Plagueis viewed the Force, which was through a purely scientific lens, focused mostly on the midichlorians. When Plagueis killed his master, Darth Tenebris, he observed Tenebris's midichlorians as he died. The Jedi thought of the cellular organelles as symbionts, but to Plagueis the midichlorians were interlopers, running interference for the Force and standing in the way of a being's ability to contact the Force directly. Through years of experimentation and direct meditation, Plagueis had honed an ability to perceive the actions of midichlorians, though at that time he did not have the ability to actually manipulate them. Plagueis watched his master die, vowing to himself that he would one day succeed in imposing his will upon the midichlorians. Shortly after the death of Tenebris, Plagueis killed a crew of smugglers and commandeered their ship. As they lay dying, he attempted to prolong their lives with the Force. He had been successful in effecting repairs to damaged blood vessels and organs, but the results had been temporary, as he had not been able to influence or appeal to the midichlorians to assist him. Plagueis compared his attempts to prolong their lives at using a sponge to dam a raging river. Yet, the ancient Sith Lords were said to have been able to draw on the energies released during death to extend their own lives, as well as the lives of others. Unfortunately, that ancient knowledge had been lost long ago, but Plagueis knew he would one day rediscover the secret. In his personal laboratories, Plagueis continued his own experiments and observations on the midichlorians. He discovered that while they appeared to resist manipulation of a sort that might imperil the balance of the Force, they remained compliant in the case of a weak-willed being manipulated by one who was strong in the Force, which explained why it was easier to use the Force to heal someone else rather than oneself. Extending life, then, could hinge on something as simple as being able to induce midichlorians to create new cells, to subdivide at will, increasing their numbers to heal or replace aging cells. While tales of the ancient Sith Lords told of sorcery and essence transfer, Plagueis had no interest in such methods. He had no desire to exist as a lingering, disembodied presence trapped between worlds. Only everlasting life would satisfy him, nothing less than the immortality of his physical body. Plagueis believed that his own personal destiny was to live forever, thus he had decided to forego the Sith rule of two. The Sith line would continue through him or not at all. To Plagueis, the goal of toppling the Republic and the Jedi Order belonged to the realm of the ordinary. The greater goal of the Sith involved toppling the Force itself. Only the Sith understood that through the manipulation of the midichlorians, the divide between organic life and the Force could be bridged, and death could be erased from the equation. As evidenced by those few Sith Lords who had managed to extend their lives, like Emperor Vitiate, who was said to have lived 1,000 years, the ancient Sith had come halfway across that bridge. Plagueis was determined to finish what they started. Over the years, Plagueis devoted himself to his experiments as his apprentice Darth Sidious built his political career on Coruscant as Senator Palpatine. Plagueis had imprisoned Darth Venomous, a rival apprentice trained in secret by his master Darth Tenebris years earlier. He used Venomous, kept in a comatose state, as a subject for his experiments with the midichlorians. After decades of study, Plagueis learned to impregnate creatures through the Force. He had actually managed to create life by manipulating the midichlorians. But he failed to exercise due caution. As he took the powers of life and death from the Force resisted. The balance of the Force, action and reaction. Finally, around 42 BBY, Plagueis and Sidious were able to will the Force to shift and tip towards the dark side. It was tangible alteration that could be felt by anyone in the galaxy strong in the Force. The shift had been the outcome of months of intense meditation, during which Plagueis and Sidious challenged the Force at their own mortal peril. Risen out of their physical selves as a single entity, they brought their full power to bear and asserted sovereignty over the Force itself. The Force had yielded to them completely, and the dark side ascended. On that same day, Plagueis allowed Darth Venomous to finally die. Then, by manipulating Venomous's midichlorians, Plagueis resurrected him. The enormity of the act stunned Sidious into silence as Plagueis killed and resurrected Venomous over and over again without assistance, until Venomous's organs finally gave out and Plagueis granted him death. However, having the power to resurrect others was not enough for Plagueis. He devoted himself to internalizing that ability, attempting to manipulate his own midichlorians. For several months, he saw no progress, but slowly he noticed his scars begin to fade, areas of his skin became smoother, and he knew eventually he would cease to age altogether. After several years, Plagueis was certain that he was on the verge of absolute success, finally being able to grant himself immortality. However, as we know, he was killed by Palpatine in 32 BBY. So, Plagueis did have the power to resurrect others, and he was on the brink of granting himself immortality, so Palpatine was telling Anakin the truth about that. However, Plagueis never taught Palpatine how to do so, which is why Palpatine said that together he and Vader would have to discover the secret themselves. But all in all, Plagueis was definitely a genius Sith Lord who achieved some incredibly powerful feats in the Force. The ability to actually resurrect dead beings belonged to him. The creation of the clone army on Kamino was shrouded in mystery, with both the Jedi and the Sith somehow involved in very different ways. In Attack of the Clones, we learned that it was a Jedi Master named Sifo-Dyas that had placed the order for the army, without the permission or knowledge of the Jedi Council. Yet, a mysterious Darth Tyrannus and the Sith were also involved in the army's creation and the recruitment of Jango Fett as its template. In the Legends novel Darth Plagueis, the origins of the clone army are fully revealed, and it was actually Plagueis himself who was the mastermind behind it, as his vision for the execution of the Sith Grand Plan took shape decades before. In 52 BBY, which is 20 years before the Phantom Menace, Plagueis, as his public persona Higo Damask, met with the Kaminoans about the possibility of creating a clone army. Plagueis intended to one day have an army that could destroy the Jedi Order. He had initially hoped to produce Yinkori soldiers, believing that their immunity to the powers of the Force would give them an advantage over the Jedi. However, the Kaminoans pointed out that the Yinkori's natural aggression would be extremely difficult to control in a military environment. Later that year, Plagueis attended a meeting on Sereno regarding transit taxes, where a small group of Jedi including Jocasta Nu, Sifo-Dyas, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Dooku were also present. Plagueis really hoped the negotiations over the taxes would fail, causing strife within the Republic, but he also intended to observe Dooku, who was a very vocal critic of the Galactic Senate. Plagueis thought that Dooku could possibly be recruited as an apprentice in the event that Darth Sidious was killed. After hours of talk in the meeting, a recess was called for, and Plagueis took the opportunity to speak with the Jedi. With Sifo-Dyas and Dooku, he discussed an impending conflict for the Republic in the future, speaking of a possible split between the core and the outer systems. Dooku admitted that the Senate was indeed corrupt and wished he could correct its flaws, and Sifo-Dyas was unwilling to admit anything out of his loyalty to the Republic. Plagueis then realized that to destroy the Jedi Order, the Sith needed to exploit their sense of righteousness and obedience to the Republic, making them to appear as traitors and enemies instead of peacekeepers. He then considered instead of creating an army to fight against the Jedi, he would create one that would fight alongside them, before one day betraying them. Preparing to exploit Sifo-Dyas' obvious fears about the future of the Republic, Plagueis was about to tell him of the cloners on Kamino who could rapidly raise an army. However, upon seeing Jocasta Nu approach, Plagueis felt the dark side warn him not to speak, and he quickly ended the discussion. It would not be until 20 years later when Plagueis would have the opportunity to speak to Sifo-Dyas again about the clones. At a political gathering on Coruscant hosted by Chancellor Valorum, Plagueis approached the Jedi Master, noticing that Sifo-Dyas' concerns of a civil war had grown more urgent. The Jedi Council was apparently unwilling to listen to his warnings, so Plagueis preyed upon his fears, convincing him that the Republic needed a military to defend it immediately. This time, Sifo-Dyas agreed with him fully, and Plagueis informed him of the cloners on Kamino, offering to finance the creation of the army personally. Sifo-Dyas was still hesitant to take action, but he accepted Plagueis' offer and agreed to seriously consider it. After the Battle of Theed and Plagueis' murder by Darth Sidious, Sifo-Dyas was fully convinced, and using the funds provided by Plagueis, he paid the Kaminoans to create an army. Dooku was aware of this and informed Darth Sidious of such plans. While Sidious was pleased that he could assume control of an army, he was not interested in a rogue Jedi Master playing a role, and instructed Dooku to kill Sifo-Dyas. With the murder of his close friend serving as his initiation into the Sith, Dooku became Darth Tyrannus, and hired the bounty hunter Jango Fett to serve as the template of the clone army. Dooku also deleted Kamino from the Jedi archives and left the Order, to ensure that the Jedi would not learn of the clone army until their most desperate hour. The training of Darth Maul, as well as his place within Darth Bane's line of Sith Lords along with Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious, was an unusual and complicated situation, full of deception on both sides. While Maul was trained by Sidious in the ways of the dark side, he was not necessarily considered to be a true Sith Lord in the eyes of Darth Plagueis, who was the reigning Sith Master at that time. All of this complex situation is explained in the Legends Darth Plagueis novel. Plagueis and Sidious were the two Sith Lords active in the galaxy, following Bane's rule of two as all Sith had done for the last 1,000 years. Around 54 BBY, the infant Zabrak named Maul was presented to Sidious by his mother, who begged the young Sith apprentice to save Maul from the life of a Nightbrother. In Legends, Maul was not the son of Mother Talzin, and his birth mother actually wanted to save him from serving Talzin as a Nightbrother on Dathomir. Though Sidious was initially reluctant to take Maul, he sensed his power in the Force and was persuaded to accept him. Sidious had Maul hidden in a Damask Holdings facility on Mustafar. Damask Holdings was a financial group led by Darth Plagueis under his public persona of Magister Higo Damask. Sidious believed that the young Maul could one day be a valuable asset to him, given that the Zabrak naturally possessed martial prowess and force sensitivity. A year after he had accepted Maul, Sidious approached Plagueis with a suggestion of using a powerful being to do their bidding. After Plagueis had survived an assassination attempt on Coruscant, both of them knew that the Jedi had felt the strong presence of the dark side there. While Sidious was concerned, Plagueis was nonchalant, insisting that the Jedi must have already accepted that the dark side was awakened and could not be checked. Sidious insisted that they still could not risk their exposure as Sith Lords, and asked Plagueis if he would ever consider training someone in the Sith arts to execute missions for them. Plagueis initially questioned if Sidious was attempting to defy the rule of two, but the young apprentice clarified that he did not mean another apprentice, nor someone who would aspire to become a true Sith Lord. He was merely proposing someone skilled in stealth and combat that they could eliminate when they no longer needed them. Convincing as he was, Sidious was lying to his master. Sidious revealed that he had found a Zabrak infant on Dathomir and that he had stowed him on Mustafar. After consideration, Plagueis was convinced of Sidious's proposition and instructed Sidious to begin training the child. Plagueis gave several commands. The child had to become inured to pain so that he may serve them fully. If his Force talents failed to mature, Sidious had to kill him. Most importantly, Plagueis instructed Sidious to train the child in the dark side, but never speak of the Sith or their ultimate plans. Plagueis wanted Maul to serve as a Sith assassin, never a Sith Lord. Sidious spent the next several years training Maul in the ways of the dark side, never revealing his true intentions to either Maul or Plagueis. While Plagueis was aware of Maul, on the other hand, Maul had no knowledge of Plagueis' existence, though he had suspicions that Sidious had his own master. Maul's training was extremely brutal, yet despite the harshness Sidious displayed, Maul respected him and maintained an intense loyalty towards his master. By 37 BBY, Sidious believed Maul to be ready for his final test. He stranded Maul on Hypori, unleashing assassin droids that hunted him for a full month. At the end of the month, Sidious traveled to the planet and challenged Maul to a duel, lying that he had another apprentice ready if Maul failed to defeat him. Though the duel was brief, Sidious was impressed by Maul's rage and attempt to genuinely kill him, revealing that he had passed his final test and his training was complete. Going against Plagueis' wishes and betraying his master, Sidious informed Maul that he was now a full Sith Lord, and granted him the title of Darth. Plagueis had no knowledge of Maul being granted the title of Darth. He believed that Maul was still only an assassin by the time of the invasion of Naboo. He was aware that Maul had become powerful, as he observed his training with Sidious. Plagueis was shocked to see that Maul wielded a saber staff, the same weapon as Exar Kun. Watching Maul train with the weapon, Plagueis told Sidious that he could not deny the young Zabrak's skill, and that he appreciated that Sidious had trained him as a fighting machine and not a true apprentice. However, Sidious thought that he did detect a slight suspicion from his master. By the time of the invasion of Naboo in 32 BBY, Plagueis was still alive, and he did not know that Sidious had been referring to Darth Maul as his apprentice for years. Maul still knew nothing of Plagueis. This is how the rule of two was not necessarily broken by Plagueis, yet Sidious had defied it by taking Maul as his secret apprentice. While the three of them were active at the same time, Plagueis thought of Maul as merely a Sith assassin, and never considered him to be a Sith Lord. Sidious deceived them both, ultimately manipulating the two to fit his own agenda as he began to orchestrate the revenge of the Sith. Most fans don't know that Palpatine's Sith Master, Darth Plagueis the Wise, was actually still alive and fully active during the events of the Phantom Menace, at least in the Legends continuity. The two Sith Lords worked from the shadows to orchestrate the blockade of Naboo and ensure Palpatine's nomination to become the next Supreme Chancellor. As they watched the events on Naboo unfold, both Plagueis and Palpatine became aware of a young boy discovered by the Jedi, who was rumored to be their prophesied chosen one, destined to bring balance to the Force. Learning of Anakin Skywalker, Plagueis became terrified, wondering if the Force itself had worked to undo 1,000 years of planning by the Sith. However, because of his own actions years earlier and his experiments with the midichlorians, Plagueis believed that he played a part in Anakin's destiny, and this is revealed in the Legends novel Darth Plagueis. It was Palpatine that first learned of the supposed Chosen One from Master Dooku. The two had discreetly become friends, and Dooku confided in Palpatine, telling him of his plans to leave the Jedi Order, and of the disturbing report that Qui-Gon Jinn had provided to the Council. Dooku told Palpatine that Qui-Gon had found a young boy on Tatooine, and the boy was said to have no father. It was possible that this boy was conceived by the Force. Dooku explained that such information had everything to do with an ancient prophecy of the Chosen One, and that Qui-Gon believed the boy stood at a vergence in the Force, and that Anakin's midichlorian count was unprecedented. When Palpatine asked him what the Jedi knew of Anakin's past, Dooku said they only knew that he had been born into slavery 9 years earlier. At hearing this, Palpatine's thoughts became distracted at learning Anakin was 9 years old, rumored to be conceived by the Force. To his horror, he wondered if he and Plagueis were indirectly responsible for Anakin's creation. 9 years earlier, around the time that Anakin would have been born, Plagueis and Palpatine had succeeded in willing the Force to shift and tip towards the dark side. It was a tangible alteration that could be felt by anyone strong in the Force, as they pushed the Force further out of balance. It was the outcome of months of intense meditation, as they suffused the galaxy with the power of the dark side. At their own mortal peril, the two Sith Lords had waged a war against the Force, bringing the full power of their wills to bear and asserting their sovereignty over the Force. At the time, they believed that the Force had yielded to them, and the light side dipped as the dark side ascended. Drunk on his own power, Plagueis had gone one step further, usurping the natural order of life and the will of the cosmic force. By this time, Plagueis had already gained the power to resurrect dead beings by manipulating their midichlorians, but he was still not satisfied, so he attempted an even more unthinkable act. He tried to bring into being a creation of his own, to initiate the birth of a forceful being. While he was proud to be able to manipulate death, it was not the same as having the power of pure creation, so he stretched out with his powers to touch all of the midichlorians in the galaxy. But it didn't work. The Force grew silent to him. Now, 9 years later, Plagueis learned of Anakin's existence from Palpatine, and he rushed to meet the young boy on Coruscant. Anakin had been brought to the capital planet by Qui-Gon, and had been staying in Palpatine's suite. Plagueis had to see this Anakin Skywalker for himself, to sense him in the Force. He had to know if the Force had struck back at him 9 years earlier, conceiving a human to restore balance to the galaxy. However, he was too late, as Anakin had already been taken to the Jedi Temple to meet the High Council. Concerned and fearful, Plagueis wondered if the Sith had been undone, and if the Force itself had worked against them. He thought that he was directly responsible for Anakin's creation. Sometime later, Plagueis made his way onto a public observatory that provided him a view of Queen Amidala's starship. He watched as Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Anakin walked along the platform. Plagueis observed Qui-Gon kneel to Anakin's level and engage in a serious discussion. Intrigued, yet also concerned, Plagueis stretched out with the Force and was subjected to an assault of imagery, a vision of the future. He saw ferocious battles in deep space, the clashing of lightsabers, and a black-helmeted cyborg rising from an operating table. By the time he returned to himself, Qui-Gon and the boy were gone. Trying desperately to make sense of what he had seen, Plagueis watched as the Nubian starship climbed into the sky. He fought to repress the truth, but he knew that Anakin Skywalker would change the course of history. Unless he instructed the Sith assassin Maul to kill Qui-Gon in order to keep the boy from being trained. Plagueis knew that Qui-Gon was the key to everything, and he had to do everything in his power to stop Anakin from becoming a Jedi. Thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and may the Force be with you.